Some of tomorrow's biggest names in art are still unknown today, but that's about to change. The art world is shifting, and a new generation of painters is breaking through with bold ideas and fearless work. In this video, we're counting down 15 young, ultra-contemporary artists on the rise, names you'll want to remember as they shape the future of painting. And before we jump in, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and lets us keep bringing you more deep dives into the artists making history right now. Sholto Blissett. Sholto Blissett paints landscapes that feel both familiar and strange. At first glance, you see gardens, hedges, ruins, and old buildings, the kind of views you might expect from a classical landscape. But on closer look, the scenes are edited. Topiary is turned into strange shapes, architecture floats or stands isolated, and paths lead to places that feel imagined rather than real. His settings read like stage sets for an idea, not simple depictions of nature. Blissett trained first in geography, then studied painting. That background shows in the way his work thinks about place, maps of feeling, not maps of land. He builds ideas about the landscape's history into the image. His paintings ask where the idea of wilderness comes from and how human taste and design shape what we call natural. He works in oil and acrylic, often on large canvases. Series titles such as Garden of Hubris and Rubicon point to how he plays with history and scale. A garden can be proud or ruined, a river crossing can be a threshold. Many of his pieces carry a quiet tension, a controlled, cultivated surface that hides odd, unsettling details. That tension is what makes a single painting feel like a short story. Galleries and collectors are noticing him now because his paintings rework old landscape ideas into a language that feels modern and slightly uncanny. Put simply, Blissett paints the history of landscape painting, but he bends that history into new, thoughtful scenes you want to look at again. Samantha Joy Groff. Samantha Joy Groff paints night scenes that feel both familiar and strange. At first glance, you see people in rural settings, fields, woods, porch steps, but the moments she shows are charged and slightly uncanny. Her figures, often young women, move like actors in a stage story, posed, costumed, and full of feeling. Animals and ritual objects appear beside them, turning ordinary country life into something like a myth. Groff works mainly in oil on canvas. Her colors are rich and often nocturnal, deep blues, warm skin tones, and sharp highlights that make faces and fabrics almost glow. She borrows from fashion and film to compose each scene. Before she paints, she often stages the picture in real life, arranging models, sewing costumes, making headdresses, and testing poses. That process gives the paintings a theatrical, made-on-purpose look that feels alive when you watch it on video. The themes in her work move between longing, desire, and the pressures of rural life. She grew up in a small Pennsylvania community, and that background shows in the details: plain clothes, small-town rituals, and the landscape itself. But she does not paint a single story. She blends memory, folklore, and invented moments so each painting reads like a short, intense scene. Georg Wilson. Georg Wilson paints landscapes that feel like stories. Her pictures look like the English countryside at first: fields, trees, hedges, quiet skies. But something is different. People are almost never there. Instead, you find strange small creatures, odd plant shapes, and hints of old tales. Her scenes feel like a memory of the country rather than a direct copy of it. Wilson trained as a painter and learned art history. She works mostly in oil on linen or panel. Her surfaces can be smooth or slightly textured. Sometimes her brushwork is careful and detailed. Other times it is loose and quick. That mix makes the paintings both familiar and new. You can read them from far away, and you can find secrets when you move closer. A clear rhythm runs through her work. The seasons: spring light, summer density, autumn gold, winter gray. The colors change, and so does the mood. But the seasons are not just background. They shape the sense that the paintings are part of a cycle, like pages from an old book that follow the year. This gives her work a calm, steady energy that feels quietly modern. Wilson borrows from folk stories and old painting traditions, but she does not copy them. She twists them. Animals and plants become characters. Trees hold a kind of presence, and empty fields suggest something waiting to be remembered. The result is a world that feels lived in and slightly strange, the kind of place you might imagine entering if you opened a storybook at night. Laís Amaral. Imagine walking into a small room packed with colorful objects, a chair, a plant, a face, all arranged as if someone paused a memory and pinned it to the wall. Laís Amaral builds pictures like that, small compact scenes where patterns, faces, and everyday objects sit next to one another like pieces in a quiet puzzle. Her paintings feel handmade, layered marks, stitched shapes, and areas that look almost like collage. Those layers make the work look warm and personal, as if each painting holds a few private moments folded together. Her colors are clear and confident. She uses strong blocks of color and repeated motifs so the eye can move around the picture easily. Faces and objects are simplified, not detailed portraits. They act more like signs or memories than direct likenesses. That simplicity gives each image a calm order, even when the picture contains many small things. The subjects read like ordinary life: people at home, small animals, chairs, plants, bits of fabric. But because she arranges them with pattern and rhythm, the ordinary becomes slightly strange. Familiar objects start to feel symbolic, as if they carry small stories about belonging, memory, and daily care. Technically, Amaral's work mixes careful drawing with playful mark-making. Textures and flat shapes sit together so the painting feels both crafted and immediate. The result is work that is cozy but alert, gentle in tone, and quietly thoughtful. Hendry. Hendry makes sculptures and site-specific works that feel like they come from just beneath the surface. Her pieces mix materials you'd expect: steel, marble, wood, with things you wouldn't: lipstick, soap, fake nails, ash. That mix gives each object a split personality, one part industrial, one part domestic, one part strangely bodily. Casting is a big part of how she works. She molds and layers, then cuts and reassembles. The process can look scientific, testing materials, trying odd combinations, sometimes working with researchers. But the results don't read like lab gear. They read like things that have been eaten, spat out, and patched back together. Whole walls can feel half-bitten. Objects can look both useful and useless at once. A constant idea in her work is the idea of skin, the outside that holds something in. She treats surfaces as clues. A smooth shell might hide a rough interior. A shiny coat might cover a fragile core. That idea lets her talk about bodies, buildings, and machines all at once without having to name them. There's a playful edge too. The surfaces sometimes wink at you with small, odd details. A smear of lipstick, a bit of grit, so the work can be funny and uneasy at the same time. Hendry makes work for galleries but also for public spaces. She has made large installations that seem to grow out of the building. In those projects, sculpture becomes architecture's parasite or companion, something that both belongs and doesn't belong. That scale shift is part of her skill. She moves from a tabletop object to a piece that changes how a room feels. Hettie Inniss. Think of a painting that smells like memory. Soft light, the shape of a room, the hint of a flower that once sat in the corner. That's the world Hettie Inniss creates. She is a London-based painter who turns personal recollections into images that feel both specific and dreamlike. Her canvases often show familiar spaces: a living room, a kitchen, a bedroom, but the details are blurred or shifted as if they are being remembered rather than observed. She talks about painting as a way to capture scent and sensation, the trace of a place that lingers long after you've left it. Inniss paints in oil, building her surfaces slowly so that light seems to float across them. Her palette leans toward gentle, glowing tones: soft yellows, muted greens, pale blues. The result is a surface that feels touched by atmosphere, not just color. Sometimes the picture fades into near abstraction, with edges dissolving as if the memory itself is slipping away. A key theme in her work is intimacy, not in the sense of grand emotions, but in the quiet way small details carry weight. A chair, a window, or the way light falls on a wall becomes a vessel for memory. These details make her work accessible while still carrying a poetic charge. Hettie Inniss stands out among young painters because she doesn't chase spectacle. Instead, she paints the kind of moments everyone has but often overlooks. Her canvases remind us that memory is fragile, shaped not just by sight but by all our senses. In doing so, she gives simple rooms and objects a deep emotional pull, turning the everyday into something worth holding on to. Melissa Joseph. Picture a piece of felt that carries a memory, soft, fuzzy, and warm, but holding an image as clear as a photograph. That's the heart of Melissa Joseph's work. She is a New York-based artist who uses needle felting and textiles to tell personal stories that connect to broader experiences. Instead of painting with oils, she paints with fibers. She presses dyed wool into flat surfaces, shaping portraits, family scenes, and everyday objects until they come alive in soft textures. The results are pictures that feel gentle and approachable, but also deeply moving. Joseph often draws from her own family history, especially her experience growing up in Pennsylvania in an Indian American household. She uses materials like felt, paper pulp, and fabric to make images of family gatherings, travel snapshots, and quiet domestic spaces. By choosing these humble, everyday materials, she makes the work feel close to ordinary life, not distant or polished, but human and relatable. Her felt portraits in particular stand out. A face made from fibers carries a kind of blur, as if it's a memory you can touch. That blur also gives the images a softness that makes them universal. While they come from her own family albums, they feel like they could belong to anyone's memory. The warmth of her materials and the honesty of her subjects make her work immediately engaging, whether you see it in a gallery or on a screen. Emily Kraus. Imagine a painting that seems to have built itself, paint pulling across the surface in sharp lines, dripping, dragging, almost mechanical in the way it settles. That's the energy in Emily Kraus's work. She is a young American painter whose abstract canvases come from both hand and system. Instead of relying only on the brush, she often creates rigs and tools that guide how the paint falls. Sometimes she rigs a canvas so it tilts and shifts while she works. Other times she uses machines or custom-built devices to drag pigment across the surface. The result is a painting that feels half controlled, half chance. Her palette often combines bold industrial colors with soft earth tones. Thick stripes, wide sweeps, and layered textures appear again and again, almost like musical notes repeating in different rhythms. Up close, you can see cracks, ridges, and accidents in the paint, reminders that the process is as important as the finished image. What sets Kraus apart is how she treats painting like both experiment and tradition. She respects the long history of abstraction, but she adds her own system-driven methods. The canvases are not just images, but records of a physical process, almost like the machine and the artist made them together. Emily Kraus is gaining attention because she pushes abstract painting forward with invention. She shows that even in a field with a long history, new methods and new tools can produce surprising, beautiful results. Moka Lee. Moka Lee's paintings pull you in with a kind of tension between the everyday and the dreamlike. Born in South Korea and now working internationally, she creates images that sit right on the edge of reality, familiar enough to recognize but strange enough to feel unsettling. Her work often focuses on bodies, gestures, and fragments of daily life. But instead of showing things clearly, she twists them. Figures might be cropped, stretched, or placed in awkward positions. Spaces don't always follow normal perspective. Walls bend, objects flatten, and colors collide. The result is a mood that feels both intimate and slightly surreal, like stepping into someone else's private memory. Color plays a big role in how she builds this atmosphere. Bright, artificial tones mix with muted, shadowy areas, giving her paintings a push and pull between lightness and weight. She often leaves areas of raw canvas or thin paint, which adds to the sense of fragility. It's as if the images are holding themselves together just enough to be seen. What makes Moka Lee stand out is her ability to balance vulnerability with boldness. The figures in her paintings might look exposed, even fragile, but the way she handles paint is direct and confident. She doesn't hide the brushstrokes or the decisions. The painting itself feels alive, always shifting. Her rise in the contemporary art world comes from this distinct mix, deeply personal imagery delivered with fearless technique. She brings fresh energy to figurative painting, showing how bodies and spaces can carry psychological weight without needing to be overly realistic. Chris O. Chris O has a way of pulling the past into the present. His paintings often borrow from art history, images you might recognize from classical European works. But he doesn't just copy them. Instead, he reimagines them with a twist, using modern textures, unusual surfaces, and fresh color choices. One thing that makes his work striking is where he chooses to paint. Rather than sticking to canvas, he often uses things like velvet, marble, or found objects as his base. The surface itself becomes part of the story. An image from centuries ago suddenly feels alive again, placed on a material that changes how we see it. His brushwork balances detail with looseness. Some areas look almost photographic in their precision, while others break down into rough textures or washes of paint. This back and forth keeps the eye moving, making old subjects feel contemporary. Chris O's art also carries a sense of play. He takes something serious, like a Renaissance portrait, and places it in dialogue with today's culture. The paintings are thoughtful, but they're also fun, showing that art history doesn't have to stay locked in the past. What sets him apart is this ability to create bridges between old and new, between high tradition and experimental surfaces. His rise in the art world comes from reminding us that painting is not just about preserving history, but about reshaping it for today. Taylor Simmons. Taylor Simmons builds his paintings like puzzles with layers of marks, textures, and symbols that slowly reveal themselves. At first glance, you might see bold shapes and bright colors, but the longer you look, the more details start to emerge. Hidden figures, shifting patterns, and traces of storytelling built right into the surface. What makes Simmons stand out is the way he blends drawing and painting. His canvases often feel like sketchbooks exploded onto large scale. Raw lines mixed with thick paint. Quick gestures sit alongside carefully worked sections. This contrast gives his work energy, as if it's still in motion, still being created while you're looking at it. He often pulls inspiration from personal history, memory, and fragments of daily life, but instead of presenting them directly, he reshapes them into abstracted forms. This makes his paintings feel both deeply personal and open-ended, leaving space for viewers to find their own meanings inside them. Color plays a huge role in his style. Simmons doesn't shy away from bold, clashing palettes. He uses sharp reds, deep blues, acidic greens, colors that buzz against each other and make the paintings vibrate with intensity. This boldness makes the work feel alive, almost electric. What puts Simmons on the rise is his ability to combine raw, expressive mark-making with a sense of structure. His paintings may look spontaneous, but they carry balance and rhythm, like music stretched across the canvas. He's carving out a space where abstract energy and personal narrative meet. Agnes Waruguru. Agnes Waruguru's art feels like walking into a quiet moment, delicate, layered, and full of small details that ask you to slow down. She works across painting, drawing, printmaking, and installation, often combining different materials in ways that blur the line between fine art and craft. Her imagery draws a lot from nature and memory. Leaves, plants, and fragments of landscape appear in her pieces, sometimes clearly and other times as soft traces or outlines. But these are never just simple depictions of the natural world. They often carry personal meaning, tied to her experiences of home, place, and belonging. One of the most interesting things about her work is her use of materials. She doesn't limit herself to canvas. You'll see her experimenting with fabric, handmade paper, or even stitching layering surfaces so that the texture itself becomes part of the story. This way of working gives her pieces a sense of fragility and intimacy, as if they're carrying memory within their very fibers. Her colors are often muted and gentle, soft browns, grays, greens, but she balances them with moments of brightness. The effect is subtle but powerful. Instead of shouting for attention, her work draws you in, rewarding careful looking with detail after detail. What sets Agnes Waruguru apart is her ability to merge the personal with the universal. She turns ordinary things, a plant, a pattern, a thread, into carriers of history and identity. She reminds viewers that art can be both delicate and strong, both rooted in tradition and pushing into new territory. Lobo Velar de Irigoyen. Lobo Velar de Irigoyen is a young painter who treats the canvas like a stage where color and gesture collide. His work doesn't try to present a neat, polished image. Instead, it thrives on energy, spontaneity, and the feeling that the painting is alive in the moment it was made. His surfaces are often layered with marks that shift between control and chaos. Big sweeping gestures sit next to delicate details. Dense clusters of color break open into raw space. This back and forth gives his paintings rhythm, almost like music scored in paint. One of the striking things about his approach is how physical it feels. You can see the body in the brushstrokes, fast movements, sudden stops, even mistakes left visible. Rather than hiding the process, he lets the process be the art. The canvas becomes less about perfection and more about intensity, about presence. His color choices tend to be bold and contrasting. Deep reds clash with sharp yellows, electric blues cut through muted tones. The paintings don't settle. They keep pushing against themselves, making you look again and again. What sets Lobo apart is his commitment to rawness. In a time when much contemporary art leans on polish and clean surfaces, he embraces imperfection. His paintings feel immediate, honest, and unapologetically human. Simon Tatum. Simon Tatum is an artist whose work moves between history, identity, and memory. Born in the Cayman Islands, his practice often digs into archives and overlooked narratives, especially those connected to the Caribbean. But instead of simply retelling history, he reshapes it, using drawing, printmaking, and mixed media to create works that feel both personal and collective. His pieces often layer old photographs, documents, and imagery with new marks and textures. This layering creates a dialogue between past and present, showing how history isn't fixed but always shifting depending on who tells it. The surfaces carry this weight, sometimes rough, sometimes delicate, as if they are holding fragments of memory. Tatum is also interested in how place shapes identity. He brings in elements of landscape, architecture, and cultural symbols, not just as background but as active forces in his art. His work feels grounded, tied to a sense of geography, while also questioning how those spaces are remembered and represented. Visually, his art mixes clarity with ambiguity. Some sections are sharply defined, a figure, a piece of text, a clear image. Others blur and fade like memory dissolving over time. This push and pull creates a powerful emotional effect. You're seeing both what is present and what has been lost. What makes Simon Tatum stand out is his ability to use art as a bridge between personal identity and shared history. He takes fragile fragments, an image, a document, a memory, and turns them into works that feel alive, relevant, and necessary today. Aline Gaiad. Aline Gaiad's paintings are all about movement and emotion carried through color. Instead of focusing on recognizable figures or scenes, she lets the brushstrokes and shapes speak for themselves. Her canvases often burst with layers of paint that feel like they're in constant motion, swirling, clashing, blending. At first glance, you notice the intensity. Bold colors come forward, sometimes bright and almost electric, other times deep and heavy. She doesn't just place colors side by side, she lets them collide, creating energy and tension across the canvas. This gives her work a sense of drama, as if something is always unfolding in front of you. But look closer, and you start to see a kind of balance underneath the chaos. Her marks may feel wild, but they hold rhythm. Shapes repeat, patterns emerge, and the layers begin to make sense together. It's like watching music take on a visual form, loud in some places, soft in others, but always connected. What makes Gaiad stand out is her fearlessness with abstraction. She doesn't try to guide the viewer with obvious images or narratives. Instead, she invites people to feel the work directly. The emotional impact comes first, and the interpretation follows after. Her rise in the art world comes from this directness. Her paintings are hard to ignore. They're big, bold, and unapologetic, but they also hold subtlety for those who spend time with them. Meghan Spielman. Meghan Spielman's paintings have a rhythm to them, woven lines, repeated gestures, and shifting grids that echo the language of textiles. At first, they look like abstract fields of color and pattern, but the more you look, the more you see the hand behind them, the brush dragging, the edges slipping, the imperfections that make each mark unique. She often takes inspiration from weaving and craft traditions, translating those ideas into paint. Instead of thread and fabric, she uses pigment and brushstroke, but the sense of structure remains. Rows of marks line up like threads on a loom, yet they never stay perfectly straight. There's always movement, always a little disruption that makes the painting feel alive. Her palette tends to be soft but carefully balanced, pale pinks, gentle blues, earthy browns, and muted grays. These colors create a calm, meditative mood, almost like the visual equivalent of breathing slowly. But within that calm, there's tension. Shapes overlap, patterns break, and the eye keeps moving to find order in the slight chaos. What makes Spielman stand out is how she uses abstraction not just for design, but for feeling. The repetition in her paintings can feel soothing, but it also suggests time, the slow build of labor, the patience of making. Each canvas holds the memory of process like a record of hours spent layering line after line.